Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately titled IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and you can find more about IPA-USA and IPA World by visiting our website at ipausa.org. Up in that top right-hand corner, you'll find links to our YouTube channel where you can follow us, our Facebook page where you can be a friend, our Instagram where you can, what do we do with Instagram? Do we follow on Instagram? I can never remember these things. And Spotify, where all the Porch Play Chats will also be. So, and YouTube, every Monday, if you subscribe, magically a new Porch Play Chat appears in your feed. And so, Porch Play Chats were created as one of our efforts to promote play. And so I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Mike Huber. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good. Really good.
Mike is an amazing person. He's the co-host of the podcast Teaching with the Body and Mind, the author of several books and one upcoming. So the first book is Embracing Rough and Tumble Play, The Amazing Erik, which is a children's book. Teaching, hold on, I got it here. Inclusion Includes Us, and an upcoming book that he just is going to be released sometime in spring of 2025, The Power to Pretend, Supporting Young Children's Power. Did I say that right? The Power in Pretend. Yes, would you say it just to make sure?
Yep. The Power in Pretend, Supporting Young Children's Power, Identity, and Agency Through Play.
Wonderful. So amazing. And in addition to all of that, he is the director of curriculum at Rise Early Learning Center. So, Mike is busy. So today he's going to talk to us about who gets to define play.
Yeah.
What a great topic. Who does get to define play?
Right. And of course, there's so many different ways we could go to think about it. Where I want to start today is thinking more about autistic children and the way they tend to play or choose to play. And before I say anything about that, I want to say that I am personally not diagnosed with autism. Also not totally sure that I'm not on the spectrum. I am diagnosed with ADHD and can give examples in that realm too, but I am thinking of some children that I work with around the idea of play. I know that back when I first started teaching, there were, like red flags or signs that we could see for whether a child was on the spectrum or not. And a lot of parents will bring these things up. So like things like lining up toys is often like, oh my God, are they autistic? They're arranging items and things like that. And it has such deficit language in it because rather than let me look at this child and what are they interested in doing, it's what's wrong with this child. And then on top of that, of course, many children either put toys in a row on the ground or stack up. Like it's actually pretty
common. Play schema. It's a play schema.
It's a play schema. Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of autistic children who do that type of play longer. But the idea to see that as a deficit rather than just an attribute is kind of what I'm going at, right? There's so I'll give an example. I had a child starting at my center, and she already had an IEP, individual education plan, from the district, and one of the things it listed was that she would, I think they would use the word collect, like small objects, like and hold them in her hand. But it wasn't written in a way that seemed like they were talking about it like, oh, isn't this an interesting thing she does? It was like, oh, she doesn't know how to play. She just holds things in her hand, which I've seen before from other like I can think of one example of a teacher bringing that up to me, of like, all he does is walk around the playground finding little stones and putting them in his hand, like he's not playing. And with both of those instances, it was like, what if we turned that around and said, oh, this is how he likes to play, or she likes
Mm,
to play, depending
mm,
which of the children I talking about. Because with that one, so I write in Minnesota, we have to write an individual child care plan for
oh,
any
okay.
child that has an education plan. And I do like that it's child care and we get the word care in there.
Mhm,
And I always start with what are some strengths for this child? And I listed that as a strength. She likes to put small things in her hand.
mhm,
And then sure enough, we got these little figurines, because then we also learned she liked to pull up figurines and sort of hold them to each other. I don't know if she doesn't speak, but, or yeah, she doesn't really speak. She's starting to say a few words, but seems to hold the figurines as if they're interacting in some way.
mhm.
And we got some like fairy figurines, knowing that she seemed interested, and then some, forgot what else, garden gnomes, sort of whatever, but little figurines. We have these little boxes. And so when she comes in the morning, she stops at the front desk, to um, we greet each other and greet the mom, and then she gets this little box. It had started with mom, like the child had an iPad, and it was the way mom could get her to walk to school,
Mhm.
from their apartment. And then it was like hard to change, and mom was kind of, in a hurry and stressed and stuff. It's like, what if we just traded at the desk? And so she got these little figurines, and for a while she would just kind of hold them, or different things. And now half of the days, I'd say, this is 5 months in since she started, she mostly doesn't even play with those things, but other things, she'll find little things. And the teacher's looking at that as that's how she plays, versus we have to get her to stop doing that so she'll, I don't know, like play baby with the other kids who are playing baby, or and
And so it gets back to who's following who, right? So
yeah,
instead
yeah,
of the teacher following the child's interests and picking up on those interests and
right,
then providing materials like you did with the gnomes and the little fairy things,
right,
the teacher saying, no, 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 you can't do that anymore. You
right.
need to come over here and do this because other kids are doing this. And so, sometimes I wonder why we feel like we have to do that.
Right. And I do think I brought up autism specifically as the starting point, because I feel like even um, there's a lot of things where we will follow the other way. So I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. So Dr. I had it up. Dr. Christy Patton, I heard her use the phrase, like, we wouldn't expect a blind child to see the way we do.
Mhm.
But when adults are working with autistic children, it's often they want them to act the way the therapist does or the teacher does, or play in the way the therapist or the teacher has decided we play. Like, this is how you're supposed to play. And therefore, like, it's common for autistic children to have what's called social skills groups, to learn how to interact socially with others. And really what it means is learn to act like a neurotypical person,
Right.
because there's more and more evidence. It's called the double empathy dilemma, I think, double empathy problem. I can't remember. But the deficit view has been autistic children or autistic people don't know how to socialize. And if you actually decide not to define what socializing properly is, don't have this like standard or the norm, what you actually find is autistic people socialize fine with autistic people.
Mhm.
And then non-autistic people and autistic people tend to have problems.
Mhm.
And for a long time, and still for a lot of people, we consider, well, it's the problem of the autistic person. It's like, but wait, you aren't changing how you interact either.
Yeah.
So, even as autistic adults like to info dump,
Mhm.
I also like to info dump, and I'm thankful for opportunities like this, because that's really all I'm doing in podcasts and, Porch Play chat and things like that. But that's how, I have plenty of friends who are autistic adults, and it's like one person will info dump for a while and talk all about breathing and
Mhm.
what, we know about breathing and how many breaths we take per minute and what, all this stuff. And then someone's like, oh, that's really interesting. And then the other person will start talking about um, some fantasy fiction book, and like series and the world building and stuff. And everyone just listens to that. And it's like, it's the way they share things. And in some circles, it'd be like, you're monopolizing conversation. You're talking for 10 minutes about something no one else knows about. And it's missing the point, right? That it's like, well, that's how they share themselves. Um, and I think this happens among other things too, that um, how people socialize. Like there's certain people who like to go to sporting events and they're watching a game, but they talk to each other.
Right? Right.
That's the way they socialize. And there's other people who will go to a coffee shop, sit across the table from each other and talk to each other. And there's a lot more, like word wise, there's probably a lot more happening.
Mhm.
And we don't necessarily consider those wrong until it's like in the context of like, because those are both considered norms, right? And often there's genders thrown into that too. Of that's how men socialize, that's how women socialize, or whatever.
Right.
And the truth is that so we don't consider that deficit necessarily, or we, like a lot of comedy is based on those ideas of how these different groups interact. But instead of saying, oh, this is just how a person interacts, when it comes to autism, ADHD too, ADHD kids get
Mhm.
into trouble a lot for interrupting. And it's like, well, they they have something to say and they
Right.
do it differently than
Mhm.
and um it gets into this problem. So I know I went off onto the
No,
discussion, but
no, I like this tangent because I think people need to hear that just like some people enjoy, having someone's hand on them and other people do not,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Being respectful of the individual and honoring how that individual feels, wants, and expects interaction to take place is more important than trying to say, oh, are they autistic? Or we need to be teaching them a different way of doing it when they're
Right.
doing it.
Right.
It's just they're not doing it the way we do it.
Right. Exactly. And that brings me back to Dr. Christy Patton. She was doing research, and the podcast episode I heard was from a few years ago. So I could probably find her findings at this point. But what she was finding, that instead of doing social skills groups with autistic
Mhm.
children, she was working with high school students. But what she did instead was did a makers group. And so it's like, let's have something that they're interested in, have people come, not worry about which kids are autistic, which kids aren't, but they're interested in making something. And now give them challenges around what they're learning, and they can socialize fine because they're interested in the thing. What
Mhm.
happens often with social skills groups is you're focused on let's learn the skill, and the skill is the way neurotypical people do it. And so
Mhm.
now it's going against what the person does. The other thing I'll just say, like eye contact is one that we often do with
Oh,
children.
yeah. Mhm.
And one, culturally, not every culture sees eye contact as important, but or even respectful. But then also with autistic people, it's stressful. And so this idea to have someone do something that's stressful, that'd be like the child who doesn't like having a hand on their shoulder, but no, you have to let me put my hand on your shoulder.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
It's that thing of you just don't respect the person and what they're doing, and you're insisting on things that actually don't matter. So now trying to get back to play, that idea of watching a child, letting them play they want to, and knowing that some of that play is not going to be something, depending on your own neuro type, you may or may not understand it as play yourself or why that would be fun. And this starts to get into other things like gunplay, rough and tumble play, princess play.
Mhm.
I never liked princess play as for me. I never really did it. When I watch kids do it, I can tell they're having fun, but I don't like think, oh yeah, that, like, I can empathize with they're really enjoying themselves,
Mhm,
but I don't understand why that would be fun. In the same way, I'm sure other people watch kids, jumping on each other and, roughhousing. Like, why
mhm.
would that be fun? But if you can understand that it is fun for them, and as long as they're being respectful of each other, and um, so I'll use the word safe, but by that I mean they're not doing things near sharp objects. They're not doing stuff where they're gonna, bump into something hard. Roughhousing in and of itself is no more dangerous than walking down the
Sure.
sidewalk, walking down the hall, or things like that. And there's actually statistical evidence to show that.
Mhm.
Uh, and so it's this idea, just because it's not how you play doesn't mean it's not how that person plays. And I think the more we respect that, and then learn, if it's not something you do, learn about it. If it's a child who speaks and is a little older, they might even be able to tell you what they find fun. And if a child who doesn't speak or can't really articulate it in a way an adult understands, you can just recognize they're having fun doing it, right? It's
So I'm going to throw in dispositions because
there
I
you go.
think
Yeah,
what you're describing is that we're valuing the child's interest by recognizing the dispositions they are expressing, right? So, am I curious? Am I happy? Am I staying on task for a long time? Am I excited? Am I engaged? Am I all of those things that
yeah,
are positive dispositions of learning that we need to be respectful of the child for.
right,
Instead of, oh, well, I don't know why that's fun. We need to do something else. When, but the opposite of those positive dispositions are the negative ones. Are you frustrating them?
right,
Are they getting angry? Are are they looking like they're bored? Are
right.
they, so
Yeah, yeah.
what's the point, right? Are you going
But
to are you going to um honor the child and recognize those positive dispositions, or are you going to create an issue where the child is so frustrated that they can't that they're going to disrupt the classroom because they're so frustrated with you?
right, right. And yeah, and so it comes down to, as I hear you saying it that way, the other way to look at it is it's easy for those, I mean, presumably people listening to this or watching this already like the idea of play and
Mhm.
want children to play. But then the next question is, who gets to define what play is? Because I think all of us, I know for me, princess play used to really, like, I felt like, you know, it was usually girls engaged in it and they were learning these like very traditional norms around
Right.
princess, or
And
no, around
female. Yeah.
femininity or being a girl, and um over time I kind of realized that's not true. It's still not the play I would choose. And there's a really amazing paper by Kaylee Burton. She'll be on she'll sorry, by the time this comes out, she'll have been a guest on That Early Childhood Nerd with me and Heather.
Oh,
um,
great.
but and it's not what her most of her work is on, but she had done a paper several years ago, and I contacted her about it because she talks about how often, like, you don't really see girls like, oh, I'm playing princess, therefore I'm going to stand here and wait for somebody to come save me,
Right.
right? Even though that was my attitude, if that's what they're learning to do from it.
Mhm.
And despite the evidence to the contrary, right? I mean, they were very focused on, I want a dress that's sparkly, that's it was around what to wear often, and not
Right.
always, of course. But how is that not play, right? I was not appreciating that. Oh,
Right.
deciding what to wear is the play, and I was totally missing it because I was kind of looking for the deficit of they're not playing in a way that I've decided is empowering. Whereas,
So
oh, they're finding empowerment by putting a, you know, princess outfit together or whatever.
Right. And so I think what I'm hoping people will hear is that your idea of play is different, maybe different than other children's idea of play. And instead of questioning what they're doing, you should observe what they're doing. And the other thing I think we jump to, because maybe we don't feel a good fit with particular children,
Right.
and so we try to figure out what's wrong with them.
Hmm.
Um, which doesn't mean we're not, observing to make sure they're on track developmentally or within the guidelines, the broad guidelines
Right, right. Yeah.
of each developmental level, and looking at their strengths and looking at areas that you might want to provide something that they might be interested in playing with that will help them
Right, right.
develop in that area, or you just relax and let them be, and they're gonna do it, right? So it sometimes I feel like because we stress, one of our primary roles as early childhood folks is to identify children who may be at risk for developmental delays.
Right.
And so I think we've taken that way overboard.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to make sure that you can still identify, like autism is a great thing to identify because there are things that a child might need
Mhm.
support with, but it's not to be more like a neurotypical person.
Right.
Like a child who has mobility issues, getting a wheelchair is actually helpful. Trying to make
Yes.
them walk the way you do is not, right? And same thing, I used the blind example earlier, right? Like you don't make the child see, you figure out what do they need so they won't be reading by visually seeing text, they will be listening to text read to them.
Yes.
And that's the support. And so with autism, there might be things that a child does need help with. So the girl I mentioned at the beginning, like she's, 5 and still in a diaper, and she is able to do some of the self-care tasks involved in that.
Mhm.
But part of it is it's going to be very different. And one, it's going to be she's going to be 5 and need
Mhm.
that, right? And that's a
Right.
difference. Um, but the skill, like we've been finding, having a song, like, oh, here's the song. It's like a auditory cue of like, oh, it's time to go into the bathroom.
Mhm.
She could pull, take off her diaper, sit on the toilet, sometimes go potty and things like that. But so she can do a lot of it herself, but she needs the auditory cue of
Mhm.
some sort.
Mhm.
Sometimes it can be a teacher singing. She needs to be given that, right? There's a lot of places that won't take a preschooler who uses a diaper or whatever, and soon kindergarten. And so there are supports that, yeah, those things are going to be delayed. A child with Down syndrome, same thing. But so diagnoses alone aren't the problem. It's when it's viewed as, oh, now we just have to get the person to behave more like we want
Mhm.
versus, um, what would be helpful to them. Being able to stay dry, to be able to go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom,
Mhm.
that's a great thing. I think that's a great goal for
Mhm.
her. It'd be
Absolutely.
the only goal, but it's that idea of being able to do things and knowing that you might need support with things. And a diagnosis doesn't take away from that. It's, oh, I might have to do things. And if a teacher is used to these ideas of standards and norms, and this is what we expect all children to do at this age, and to know, oh, some won't,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Mhm.
And what things can you do, if it's thinking of older grades, if it's a content related thing, the child who's blind is going to learn the content differently than the child who can see and is reading using a textbook and reading it, but the content doesn't have to change. And just the way people learn, right? That someone doing something versus only reading about it, like, so like there are different kids will need different um, avenues for learning, and so diagnoses can help with that. Or just thinking my own child who's autistic, when they were younger in school, there were things like just they might have to tell the teacher, oh, the overhead light is too much for me.
Mm-hmm.
Sit
Yeah.
at the edge. And every room's going to be a little different. So there wasn't an easy way to write it in the IEP. They finally had to write, or not the accommodation plan, not the IEP, but that they'll just tell the teacher.
Yeah. Just tell me if the light is bothering you.
Right, yeah. Because it's like fluorescent lights, it doesn't matter where you are because it's the flickeriness, or you know what I mean? Like it, but just that idea that, so diagnoses themselves aren't bad.
No, they're not bad.
The
But
deficit view.
Yeah, I think we try to diagnose them to get them support when maybe they're just doing typical behavior, but not the way you would do it, right? So early intervention is critical. But you shouldn't be the one that's deciding what it is they may or may not have. You should be the one that says, here's what I'm seeing. Are you seeing this at home?
Yep.
And if so, maybe we should get your child screened just to be on the safe side. I had those conversations with parents all the time after we had observed and observed and observed. And we're like, so, sometimes I think we jump to, oh, this child is behind.
They can't do, basically.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can observe, you can document, you can ask the family what they're doing at home. I had a 3-year-old that didn't say a word at school, and we were like, oh my God. And we talked to mom and dad, and we said, can you tell me how many words? She said, oh my God, he talks nonstop from the moment he walks in the door until. I said,
that was me.
Wonderful.
Right. I didn't speak until halfway through kindergarten. At school. At home, I talked a lot. More like what we're doing now.
Yeah. And so once you do that, you just check that off and go, okay, not here, but at home, awesome. Yeah. Fabulous. Mike, this has been wonderful as always. Yeah. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to say before we?
Well, I think I do want to just give credit to Carrie Cherney Hahn, who is her new book, Beyond Inclusion.
Oh, I've seen that one.
Yeah, it really hits home at a lot of the ableist myths and busts them. And I think she's a speech language pathologist and friend of mine. And one of the things that I think gets at the heart of that is she would go into classrooms and, pull the child out to go to speech therapy. But she always started from a strength. And what that looked like was, another kid, like, why do you get to go out there? And the girl just turned and said, well, I have important things to say. And she helps me so other people can understand what I have to say. And
oh, look at that. Look at that empowerment.
So that type of empowerment is kind of what we're going for. So really follow what the kids are playing. I mean, that in some ways it's really simple, but then admittedly, sometimes you'll run into your own biases or experiences, and just, that's why we reflect.
Yes. And sometimes we're getting in our own way.
Yeah.
And so just keep that in the back of your mind and just say, is this my stuff or the child's stuff?
Yep.
Because sometimes it's your stuff.
Yeah.
And I was one of those teachers when I was teaching. I was one of those teachers that would say, look at Miss Debbie's eyes. Now, please know this was in the 80s and 90s. So I was stupid back then. And now I think back and go, oh my God, that was so disrespectful and so culturally inappropriate. But you learn. That's why you go to school.
Yep.
So don't think everybody is perfect. We've all made billions of mistakes and continue to make them. Right. But it's that reflection that you really need to ask yourself. Is the child really enjoying themselves?
Right.
Are they focused? Are they repeating patterns? Are they not repetitive behavior? Right. So what is it? Right. Instead of, oh my God, there must be something wrong. Right. All right, Mike, you're wonderful. Hang tight while I close this out.
Yeah.
So to learn more about IPA-USA, please visit our website at IPAUSA.org. And until next time, keep on playing.